I greet you in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, wherever you are. Peace be upon you. My Christian brothers and sisters, praise the Lord. I trust that you are doing well wherever you are. And now, I just want to give a response to a call I had earlier today when a Muslim preacher based in Nairobi called me, and we basically initially we were scheduled to have a debate, but which didn't really happen, but because of unavoidable circumstances. But we did end up having a time together where we basically had a chat on the prophethood of Muhammad and whether he was, or rather he is, a universal messenger or not. So the topic was not really whether Muhammad was a prophet or not. And in this response, and even earlier on, I did not make a case of the prophethood of Muhammad or not. Rather, what I was doing is to look at the message of the Qur'an and how Muhammad understood himself. Did he understand himself as a warner to the whole universe, or a warner to a specific people group? Now, what does the Quran say? I also pointed out to a contradiction that is within the Quran, chapter 35 verse 24 and chapter 36 verse 6. But in response, a Muslim friend, a preacher from Nairobi again, has come up with an explanation to try and defend the fact that this Quranic verse is not a contradiction. So therefore, what I will do is basically start a look at the Quran, and in regards to the messengerhood of Muhammad, what does the Quran say? Since I didn't get an opportunity to teach, perhaps I can take time now to teach and look at the overall message of the Quran in regard to this topic. A good place to start is chapter 14, Quran chapter 14, and verse 3 and 4. This is what the Quran says, Surah Al-Ibrahim. We sent not a messenger except to teach in the language of his own people, in order to make things clear to them. Now Allah leaves straying those whom he pleases, and he guides whom he pleases. And he is exalted in power and full of wisdom. So the Quran says that God did not send a messenger except to teach in the language of his own people. In other words, every prophet that came was sent to his specific people group to teach them in the language they understood, in their own language. And therefore, this tells us that if prophets like Prophet Elijah or Zechariah or Musa, they were all sent speaking the language of their own people. In other words, a Fulani prophet or warner, a Somali warner, a Kikuyu warner, all this, a Hindu warner, coming to speak the tongue, the language of their own people. In fact, not only that, but when we read chapter 13 and verse 7, the Quran says, and the unbelievers say, why is not a sign sent down to him, that is to Muhammad, from his Lord? But you are truly a warner, and to every people a warner, and to every people a guide. So so the Quran is saying that every people had a guide, a warner was sent to them. And this warner came speaking the language of their own people. In fact, according to the Quran, there are people that are called Ahlul Kitab, the people of the book. These are Jews and Christians. So the Jews and Christians had warners sent to them. In fact, they had a book, a revelation from God sent to them. But there were a people that did not have a prophet. They did not have a book. Let's read together chapter 6, verse 156. This is what the Quran tells us and identifies those people. It says, speaking of those people, in this book, I began from 100 and... let me begin from 154 to get the context. Moreover, we gave Moses the book, completing our favor to those who would do right, and explaining all things in detail, and a guide and mercy that they might believe in the meeting with their Lord. 155. And this is a book which we have revealed as a blessing, so follow it and be righteous that you may receive mercy. 156. Lest you should say the book was sent down to two peoples before us, that is, the Christians and the Jews. And for our part, we remained unacquainted with all they learned by astonish study. And so the Quran is speaking to the Arabs, says, lest on the last day you claim that you did not receive a book, you did not receive a messenger, but the book was only sent to the Christians and the Jews before you. Therefore the Quran has come in the message of your own language, in your own tongue, i.e. Arabic. And so the message of the Quran, how Muhammad understood himself initially, he did understand himself as a warner sent specifically to the Arabs. Why? Because according to Muhammad, according to Allah, according to Jibril, every nation had a prophet. Every nation had a prophet. In fact, the Quran in chapter 2 verse 213 says, in the beginning, that every people were one Ummah. At the beginning, every people were one Ummah. They were one nation. That is, I'm just paraphrasing the same. And in fact, every nation had a prophet sent to them. And let's read that in chapter 35. Chapter 35 and verse number 24. And I want you to follow me, my Muslim brother. I want you to follow with me. Chapter 35, we're reading from verse 24. This is what it says. Truly, we have sent you, O Muhammad, in truth as a bearer of glad tidings, and as a warner. And there never was a people without a warner, having lived among them in the past. So in the past, the Quran is claiming that every people, every nation had a warner, had a messenger, had a prophet sent to them, apart from this specific people group, which are the Arabs. So the Arabs, according to the Quran, never had a prophet. How? In chapter 36, Surah Al-Yasin. And we will therefore also try to demonstrate that sometimes the message of the Quran contradicts itself. And how? Let's read together. Chapter 36 and verse 5 and 6. It says, this is a revelation, speaking of the Quran, this is a revelation sent down by him, the exalted in mighty, the most merciful, in order that you may admonish a people whose forefathers had received no admonition, and who therefore remain heedless of the signs of Allah. So here the Quran is saying, Allah is speaking to Muhammad and is saying that we have sent you with this Quran, which is a revelation that has come down from the exalted, the mighty one, that you might warn a people whose forefathers were not warned. Now, the context here suggests that these people are the Arabs. Therefore, the Arabs were not warned. So now, if this is the case, then it means that the chapter earlier on was lying. Because the chapter 35 verse 24 said that every nation had a warner. How can that be true when the Quran says that the Arabs are a people group that had no warner? And therefore you, Muhammad, have been sent to a people whose forefathers were not warned. But again, if you consider that the Quran says that Ishmael was a prophet, that Ibrahim was a prophet, Khalilullah, the friend of God. But according to Muslim books, Ishmael is apparently among the forefathers of the Arabs. If Ishmael was a prophet and he went to the Arabs, then the Quran is lying when it's talking to Muhammad and telling him that we have sent you to a people whose forefathers were not warned. Now, to try and erase this contradiction, to try and explain off this contradiction, Brother Abdulrahaman Abdulghani, my engineer friend from Nairobi, brings another verse. He brings chapter 5, and let's look at it and respond to it. Chapter 5 and verse 19. And this is what it says. O people of the book, now has come unto you, making things clear unto you, our messenger, after the break in the series of messengers, lest you should say there came unto us no bringer of glad tidings. So the Quran here purportedly is saying that Muhammad has come after a break of prophets. So there was a time that there was no messenger. But if that is the truth, if this verse is true, then Surah 35 verse 24 cannot be true. Because Surah 35 verse 24 told us that every nation, every people had a warner. In other words, the Fulani in Nigeria had a warner. The Hindu in India had a warner. The people in South America had a warner, a prophet sent among them. But here you're telling us there was a break. When was this break? If there was a break, it means chapter 35 verse 24 is a lie. Because apparently there are people that died without a prophet. Now, my brother Abdulrahman, in explaining this verse, he says he brought an hadith from Sahih al-Bukhari. In Sahih Bukhari, the Prophet Muhammad says that the prophets are brothers from paternal brothers. They are brothers from the father's side. And he is the closest brother to Isa, to Jesus. But again, that is a lie, because according to Islam, Isa does not have a paternal father. He does not have a paternal father. Secondly, according to the Quran, every nation had a prophet, had a warner sent to them. So if you say there was a period, then you are actually lying. Why? Because Surah Yasin shows us that there was a prophet, actually prophets, that were sent even after Jesus. We read Surah Yasin. Surah Yasin, verse 14. And this is what it says. Surah Yasin, chapter 36, and verse number 14. It says, and we first sent to them 2 messengers. They rejected them, But we strengthened them with a third. They said, truly, we have been sent on a mission to you. Now, if you read the context of this verse, the Sababul Nuzul, the explanation that has been given by the Muslim exegetes like Ibn al-Kathiri, Jalalaini and others, they say this verse is talking about messengers of Isa, prophets. The Quran is saying that it is Allah that sent them, so they were messengers of Allah. But these messengers, if they were messengers that were sent after Isa, in other words, after Isa had been taken up, it means that the hadith that says there is no messenger between Isa and Muhammad, the 600 years gap, there is no messenger, then it is in contradiction to this verse. Moreover, chapter 35 verse 24 has already told us that every nation, every people had a messenger. Moreover, Islamic history tells us that Ishmael is a warner, is a prophet. If he is a prophet, then he must have warned his own people, the Arabs. Therefore, when Muhammad is told that we are sending you to a people whose forefathers were not warned, it's a lie. Because the forefathers of the Arabs were clearly warned. But not only that, Muhammad, how did he understand his message? Let's look at chapter 26. Chapter 26 and verse number 214. This is what it says. Chapter 26, verse 214. It says, and admonish thy nearest kinsmen. So Muhammad is told to admonish his nearest kinsmen. Muhammad was an Arab from the clan of Hashim. So if he is if he is from the clan of Hashim, a Qurayshi Arab, that's why when Allah now brings him and tells him, warn your own people, he began by warning his own people. In fact, that is what we see in the Quran as we read Surah 12. Surah 12, verse 2. Listen to this. Surah 12, verse 2. It says, we have sent it, that is the Quran, as an Arabic Quran, in order that you may learn, you may understand. So, can you imagine if I went to India and I told the Indians, I told the people, I stood in the city square and told the people, I have come with a message from the king. It is written in Arabic that you may understand. Would they understand you? What would they think of you? So the message of the Quran was specific for the Arabs, so that the Arabs on the last day would not say the message was only sent to the children of Israel, to the Jews and the Christians, and we did not know what they were reading. That's why we see in chapter 6, verse 156, the Quran says, now this one has been sent to you. Where do we find the other evidence? Chapter 62. Chapter 62. There is a lot of evidence from the Quran that we can read. Chapter 62. Let's read together again. Chapter 62. Verse 2. It is he who has sent you amongst the unlettered a messenger from among themselves to rehearse to them his signs, to sanctify them, and to instruct them in scripture and wisdom, although they have been before in manifest error. Now, I'm reading what Yusuf Ali says, not me, not my words. Yusuf Ali, the Muslim scholar and translator, says this: the unlettered applied to a people, it refers to the Arabs in comparison to the people of the book, who had a longer tradition of learning, but whose failure is referred to in verse 5 below. As applied to individuals, it means that Allah's revelation is for the benefit of all men. And so this is what the Quran is saying, that the unlettered, and the Muslim scholar here, Yusuf Ali, is agreeing with my assessment that the unlettered here means the Arabs. Now, this does not mean that the Arabs did not know how to read and write. It basically means that the Arabs, unlike the Jews and Christians, the Ahlul Kitab, they had no book. They had no book. That's why when they fail to believe in Muhammad, Allah is questioning them. How? He is questioning them in many places in the Quran. In chapter 41 and in chapter 41, verse 44, the Quran says, He had we sent this as the Quran in a language other than Arabic, they would have said, why are not the verses explained in detail? What? A book not in Arabic? And a messenger an Arab? Say, it is a guide and a healing to those who believe, and to those who believe not. There is a deafness in their ears and a blindness in their eyes, that they are, as it were, being called from a place a far distance. So the Quran is saying, if Allah had brought a message in a language other than Arabic, in Fulani, in Acholi, in Hindu, in English, in any other language apart from English, apart from Arabic, the Arabs would have cried foul. They would have said, oh, why are you bringing to us a messenger that does not speak Arabic, an Arab? Why do you bring us a message that is not in Arabic? Just like the Injil was in Greek, just like the Zabur and the Torah were in Hebrew. Why are you bringing us a message that is not in Arabic? They would have cried foul. So what did Allah do? He brought down a message that is in Arabic, that they may understand. That's why in chapter 34 and verse 44, chapter 34 and verse 44, this is what it says. I want you to follow very keenly together with me. It says 34 verse 44. It says, but we have not given them, talking of the Arabs in the context, we have not given them books which they could study, nor sent messengers to them before thee as warners. And their predecessors rejected the truth. These have not received a tenth of what we had granted to those, yet when they rejected my messengers, how terrible was a rejection of them. So Allah is wondering, why are these Arabs not believing you, O Muhammad? Yet we had not sent a messenger, a warner, before you to them. Again, this is a lie, because chapter 35 and verse 24 told us that every people had received a warner. Yet Allah is telling Muhammad here once again that we are sending you to these people who had received no book, who had received no warner. But I thought Ishmael already went to the Arabs. So why is Allah saying that there are people who never received a book, who never received a messenger? What happened to the Sufi Ibrahim? Because there was Sufi Ibrahim or Musa. There were the books of Ibrahim. So how can Muhammad say, if Ibrahim is the father of the Arabs through Ishmael, how can the Quran say that they had no book, when actually Ishmael had, when his father Ibrahim had the Suf, he had the scriptures? So the message of the Quran once again seems to be in contradiction. In chapter 6, verse 92, chapter 6, verse 92, I want you to follow with me. Chapter 6, verse 92. It says, "And this is a book which we have sent down, bringing blessings and confirming the revelation which came before it, that you may warn the mother of cities and all around her." So, message of the Quran has been sent to warn the people of Makkah, the mother of cities, and the cities around her. Now, Muslim exegetes always add the words all the world, because Makkah is in the center of the world. Those are things that Allah has not said. That's why when Muhammad moved from Makkah, he went to preach in Taif. When he was beaten in Taif, he went to preach in Medina. When things were very hot, he ran to Medina, Yathrib. And that is how he understood his message. But now we find verses in the Quran that are saying that we have not sent you but to be a mercy to mankind, like chapter 7 verse 158 or chapter 21 verse 107. So how would we be able to respond to those verses? How can we understand those verses? I gave you an analogy earlier. Let me say once again. If the Nigerian president was to stand today and he says, "Oh you people, I am the president to you all," would that statement be true if he makes it? It would be true if he made that statement in Lagos. But the all there does not mean all, including that he is the president of America or is the president of Jordan. No, the all there should be understood in the context of Nigeria. In the same way, when the Quran says we have not sent you but that we may be a mercy to mankind, that does not mean all mankind. In fact, if using the same analogy, in chapter 19 and verse 21, Jesus is also said to be a mercy, and his mother a mercy, and a sign to the Lil Alamin, to the whole world, to all mankind. So you can use the same analogy. So the Quran, the point I'm bringing out is that the message of the Quran was to be understood for the people of Makkah, for the Arabs, that the Arabs could understand. Again, in chapter 42, verse 7, the Quran says this, chapter 42 and verse 7. "Thus we have sent by inspiration to thee an Arabic Qur'an, that you may warn the mother of cities and all around her, and warn them of the day of assembly, of which there is no doubt, when some will be in the garden and some will be in the blazing fire. So the Quran is very clear in this regard, that his message, as he understood himself, was a message for the Arabs that the Arabs could understand. I don't know how much clearer Muhammad would have been. That's why we read in Surah Al-Yunus in chapter 12 and verse 2 that we have brought down this Quran in Arabic that you may understand. But earlier on, my brothers also brought an hadith. In this hadith, Muhammad is alleged to have said that there is no Christian or Jew that will listen to me, that will hear my message and decide not to follow me, but he will be in hellfire. He'll be among the dwellers of hell, to paraphrase his words. Again, this cannot be true because it seems to be against what the Quran teaches. In chapter 2, verse 62, the Quran says, those who believe in the Quran, that is the Muslims, and those who follow the Jewish scriptures, and the Christians, and the Sabians, any who believes in God and the last day and works righteousness shall have their reward with their Lord, and on them shall be no fear, and they shall not grieve. So the Quran here is saying, if you are Christian, if you are a Jew, if you are a Sabian, and you believe in God, and you do good deeds, then on you shall be no fear on that day. You shall have no fear, neither shall you grieve. So if you come and say, we must then be Muslims, according to chapter 3, verse 85, then it means it's in a contradiction with this. It is in a contradiction with this verse. And if the message of the Quran seems to be contradicting, then that tells us that it is not from God. But clearly, brothers, Muhammad understood himself as a warner that had come to the unlettered people, i.e., the Arabs, to warn them, so that the Arabs also would not claim on the last day, but they did not have a message in their own language, and therefore the Quran has come in Arabic, that they may understand. That is the plain teaching of the Quran. Now you can reject that, but surely is clear as the moon in a dark night. That is what the Quran is teaching, and that is how Muhammad understood his message. And therefore, in response to Abdulrahaman, I would say, yes, Surah 36 verse 14 shows us that there were messengers that were sent after Jesus. And these messengers were sent by God himself. In fact, the context, according to Muslim scholars, suggests that these messengers were sent to Damascus, to Antioch. The Muslim scholars tell us that this was Bulus, or Paul, and Peter and Johanna, John. But some propagandists would tell you that John was not a disciple, was not a prophet, was not a messenger of God. Yet the Quran is very clear that we strengthen them with the third. Surah Al-Yasin, chapter 36 and verse 14. So I want to conclude just by saying that on the topic of the universal prophet, no, Muhammad understood himself as a prophet in coming in the line of the messages before him, but coming to warn the Arabs in their own language. So I'll switch this over to Swahili for my Swahili speakers, and we will do this shortly and look at the message of the Quran in regard to this. So God bless you and keep you, and may his face shine upon you. In Jesus' name, amen. Actually, before I finish off, I see my brother Muhammad Kroma, so I might want to welcome you. Muhammad, if you're listening to me and you want to come on camera, let me see if I can add you. Perhaps you can respond if you have time. I was going to end it here, but if you are there and you are willing to come on, you can come. Let me send you okay. Do you want to come on? Okay. It seems Muhammad Kroma is not available. We therefore will end it here so that we can look at something else. Probably we can look at the same topic in Swahili.